Welcome to our daily reflection for this Saturday, August 9th. And today we hear a thread about being aware lest we forget God's benefits and that everything is a gift from God. And then when we get to the gospel, we're going to see that there's a problem of faith, a crisis of faith. And we'll see that if we can avoid forgetting God's benefits, it'll strengthen us to have faith when our faith is challenged. And so there's a link, I believe, between that first reading and the gospel reading. So let's dive into it. In that first reading, it's from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 and following, which is the greatest of Jewish prayers in the Old Testament, the Shema, which means in Hebrew to hear, to listen. And it's, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one Lord, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength." And then the admonition is you should take these words to heart that God's giving you, and you shall drill them into your children. So the first thing after the call to love God is to teach our children to love God and to know God. So that is so important. God makes it the very next commandment. The very next thing he says is to teach this. And then he gives us a practical lesson on how to teach our children. And how is that? By speaking about these things in the home and out of the home, when on a journey, when on the road, when at table, at a meal. And so make God a common topic of conversation. In other words, it's not reserved for Sunday catechesis, but we're to make God something we talk about. You know, God and his ways should permeate the day. In other words, we shouldn't go through 6 days of the week not thinking about God, then all of a sudden think about him on Sunday. And so that's what God says. The best way to catechize our kids is to talk about God casually and commonly in our daily life. If we want God to be part of our daily life of our kids, we have to converse about God daily. And so, and of course, if we love God with all of our heart and with all of our soul and all of our strength, how can we not but talk about God? And how can he not be a common focus and topic of conversation? So those two things flow together beautifully. And then there comes the admonition. Look, the Lord's giving you this good land with good houses, with vineyards and cisterns and all these things you didn't make. And take care lest you forget that this is all a gift from God. And so that's the admonition that God gives. Don't forget everything is a gift from God. And then that leads us to Psalm 18, which is David giving praise to God because he sees everything as a gift. And so David exemplifies what it means to receive everything as a gift from God. A love that's stirred up, a love that leads to praise. And then we have the gospel, and we have, the disciples unable to exorcise a demon out of a man. They asked Jesus why they couldn't do this. And he says, because of your little faith. And he says, look, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you could do anything. And nothing will be impossible for you. And they have a lack of faith. Why? Because they forget whom they serve. They forget whose name they call upon. That is the name of Jesus and God. And so we must be careful lest we forget God and his ways. And if we keep that in mind and in praise and gratitude like David does in Psalm 18, David exalts God because he knows he can do anything with God. Nothing is impossible with God. And that's an echo that Jesus gives even from Psalm 18. So let's be mindful of God, and then we will be full of faith. May the Lord bless and keep you.
This daily reflection is brought to you thanks to the generous support of the Mission Circle. Join the Mission Circle to help Catholics worldwide understand, live, and share their faith. Sign up at missioncircle.org today.